Well, welcome to another Dante walkthrough. We're into hell proper now in Canto 5, and we're immediately met by Minos, one of the guardians, whose task is to allocate people to their appropriate circles. This one, I've called this everybody's favourite canto. It gets cited a lot, as we'll see, and it's really a stark departure from the journey so far, because we do get to meet people, and for the first time these people talk. So in this case, the loving couple, Francesca and Paolo, talk about their situation, and we'll cover a lot of other characters that are mentioned in the canto. At times I use this canto as something of a litmus test. When you pick up a translation you haven't seen before, read the commentary on this particular canto, you get a feeling for how that particular person, the translator, commentator, sees Francesca and Paolo's predicament, how they sense that. So this canto will introduce Dante's technique of using encounters with real people, either who mostly may have passed away or had some issue, some still alive, which would have at the time been, I think, quite a shock to readers. It's a bit like, I guess, a bit like reality TV would be now. To bear in mind that Shakespeare, in all his plays, has no contemporary figures, whereas Dante uses this technique of conversations with actual people who readers would have been well aware of. Remember also Dante's personal situation at the time of writing the Inferno. He's been exiled from Florence, so he's moving around to whoever can show him any extension of hospitality, kindness, or whatever. We'll talk a little bit more about this at the end in the wrap-up. The canto's got some really beautiful poetry. It's got a lot. There are many ambiguities in the text and the words used here, and again we'll touch on that in the wrap-up as to why that is. As always, the translation is my own, as best I can interpret the Italian, so I have no problems then with any copyright issues. We did say that this canto has had a lot of impact on other artistic works, and I'll put a couple of pictures up on the video version. For example, in theatre and opera, I've counted here, if you have a look on the screen, there's at least 20 operas written about Francesca da Rimini, from people like Saverio Mercadante, Sergei Rachmaninoff, down to probably the one that's performed more often now, Riccardo Zandone, was done by the Met not that long ago. In terms of works of art, lots and lots of paintings of Francesca and Paolo, and probably the most noted artwork is Auguste Rodin's The Kiss, which I'm sure most of you would have seen. That sculpture it was in Sydney not long ago. That is the kiss in question in the canto. So it was inspired by the story of Francesca and Paolo. So a lot of inspiration from this story to other people, both art, music, and whatever. So we're off to circle 2. It's the circle of the lustful, and in this one I'll probably start with the Italian and then have the English, because I'm fairly familiar with the Italian in this particular canto. So off we go. You will recall the closing line of the last canto, and I came to a place where nothing shined. So we open with Dante describing his descent down from the first to the second canto. Così dicesi del cerco primaio, giù nel secondo, che men loco cinghia e tanto più dolor che pungia guaio. And so I descended from the first circle to the second, which encloses less space, but through greater pain goads lament. Che men loco cinghia, which less space it circles, e tanto più dolor, and a lot more pain, che pungia aguayo, that pokes, sticks, and forces more woe. You'll recall now the description of Inferno is an inverse cone where the it gets narrower the further down you go. So that's hence the need to men loco jingya. Stavvi minos orribilmente rigna, esamina le colpe nell'entrata, giudica e manda secondo cavinglia. There stood Minos, horrible and snarling. He examines each sinner at the entrance, judges and directs them by how he encircles himself. A bit convoluted, but that Stavvi Minos is quite a strong opening. It's like a statue standing there, immovable. Horribilmente ringia, snarling, growling. He examines all the sinners at that entrance. He judges and directs them in terms of how he encircles himself. Well, what does all that mean? Secondo cavinglia, we'll find out. Dico che, quando l'anima malnata vi vien dinanzi, tutta si confessa, e quel conoscitore della peccata, we break then to the next terzina, which we'll pick up. I mean that when the ill-born soul comes before him, they confess all, and that connoisseur of sins vede qual loco d'inferno è da esse, cinghisi con la coda tante volte, quantunque grade vol che giù sia messa. So decides what place in hell suits it, and coils his tail by the same number as the circles below that fit the sinner. So the sinner fronts up to Minos, he's just standing there as the judge and decider at this point. They can't hold anything back, they confess everything, and he uses his tail to encircle his body to represent the number of circles. Now, either his tail, it's a bit ambiguous, so you could take the view that either his tail is very long, and if you're going to the 8th circle, he runs it around his body 8 times, or you could equally say that, okay, you're going to the 8th circle, and he'll rotate his tail 8 times. He'll go 1, 2, 3, and count out the number that you're going to, basically. So you could read that either way. But there's some lovely lines there. E quel conoscitore della peccata. Like, he's a connoisseur of sins, Minos, and we'll talk about him in a minute. There's a nice run from line 11. La coda tante volte, quantunque grade vol che giù sia messa. The anima malnata, the ill-born, as opposed to the benenat, or the well-born, or those assured of salvation, as it were. So Minos, why does Dante choose Minos? Because he brings together the two aspects of judging, judicial activity, and lustfulness. So Minos was king of Crete, probably one of the first rulers controlled the Mediterranean. He ridded it of pirates. He had with him famous craftsman Daedalus from Athens, who fell from grace in the end by accommodating a request of Minos' wife, the queen Pasiphae, which we'll go into. Minos had boasted that the gods would grant him any wish, and he made preparations for a sacrifice to Poseidon, and he prayed that a bull would emerge from the sea. Miraculously, a beautiful white bull came ashore, but Minos had admired it so much that he decided he'd keep it, and he sacrificed a different animal from his herd instead, which really annoyed Poseidon. To avenge himself, so what Poseidon did was he caused the queen Pasiphae to become incredibly lustful and fall madly in love with the white bull. So her request to Daedalus was that she wanted to consummate this passion, with the bull. So she had Daedalus construct a fake cow within which she could place herself, and in this way she became pregnant via the bull, and out of this horrendous situation arose the Minotaur, and which Daedalus then created the labyrinth to hold the Minotaur. Minos himself, the husband, was prone to infidelity. Was quite lustful himself. So Pasiphae put a curse on him. She was quite knowledgeable of magical herbs, etc. The curse was such that he would ejaculate serpents, scorpions, and centipedes, killing anybody that he played around with, as it were. So here we've got a character in Minos that's yes, there's a background to him as having fair and equal judging capabilities, but there's this underlying thread of strange lustfulness and the goings on that we've just been through. So he's sort of an appropriate character to have at the beginning to do the allocation of the sinners to their various final locations, and he's got this element of lustfulness that suits the particular circle we're in. Sempre dinanzi a lui ne stanno molte, vanno vicendo ciascuno al giudizio, dicono e odono e poi son giù volte. There's always a crowd before him, each in turn seeking judgment. They speak, they hear, and then are thrown down. Some great lines there in the Italian. Dicono e odono e poi son giù volte. But Minos now notices something a bit amiss here. He's a living character, accompanied by the shade of Virgil. So this is something that he's not used to, and he leaves off his judicious duties, which he obviously takes quite seriously. O tu che vieni al doloroso ospizio, disse Minos a me quando mi vide, lasciando l'atto di cotanto offizio. Are you who come to this painful place, Minos said when he saw me, interrupting the work of his high office. So Dante gives him a bit of esteem, lasciando l'atto di cotanto offizio. He takes his work seriously, and he's an important character. And he goes on to say, guarda come entri e di cui tu ti fidi, non ti inganni l'ampiezza dell'entrare. And we'll just stop there mid-terzina. Watch out how you enter, and in whom you trust. Don't be fooled by the ease of your entrance. I personally think this is a much more important and insightful couple of lines than is often given credit for, and I'll talk about it at the end. But when you read the commentaries, what they're really saying is that Minos is having a dig at Virgil. He's basically saying to Dante, it's pretty easy to get in here, but just watch out who you trust. In other words, I wouldn't be trusting this old bloke you're with, he's not gonna be there when you really need him. So this is there to scare and to frighten Dante, as it were. That's the normal perception of these lines, and that's quite reasonable. And Virgil now comes in. Il duco mio a lui, perché pur gridi? And my master to him. So why are you yelling? And we get an actual full repeat of the words that Virgil spoke to Caronte. Back in Canto 3, when Caronte sort of fronted up to Dante, sort of saying, what are you doing here? So Virgil replies, non impedirlo suo fatale andare, volsi così colà dove si puote, ciò che si vuole e più non dimandare. Don't impede his destined journey. It is thus willed, where will and power are one, so ask no more. So it's those last two lines, 23 and 24, are directly from the previous canto. Volsi così là dove si puote, ciò che si vuole e più non dimandare. Beautifully musical couple of lines. So now they've effectively got past Minos. He's no longer part of the action, and they're entering into the circle proper. Or incomincian le dolenti noti a farmisi sentire, or son venuto là dove molto pianto mi percuote. Now I could hear those woeful sounds. Now I had arrived where the sounds of much crying struck me head on. There's some strong words in that one, and le dolenti noti is a very common current Italian phrase, has been for a long time, so it's sort of flowed out of Dante's initial use, the doleful sounds, and that word to say that these sounds, molto pianto mi percuote, the crying, mi percuote has really slapped him, really belted him straight in the face as he's come into this area. Io viene in loco d'ogni luce muto, che mucchia come fa mar per tempesta, se da contrari venti è combattuto. I'd come to a place mute of all light, that moan like the sea in a tempest, beaten by wings from all directions. So again, he's some nice lines here. D'ogni luce muto. So he's given light the sense of being mute, to different sensations. So it's a dark place here. Mucchia come fa mare per tempesta. So you can sense, waves belting against each other or on the rocks. Da contrari venti, like contrary winds are belted around, are beaten around. So Dante and Virgil have entered this place full of doleful sounds and the sound of swirling winds. We can only assume that their sight starts to improve through the benefit of divine providence as things go on. La bufera infernal, che mai non resta, mena gli spiriti con la sua rapina, voltandoli e percuotandoli li molesta. The hellish swirls that never rest drives the spirits in its fierce wake, tumbling and spinning as it swirls them. So just that last line, 33, voltando e percuotendo li molesta. It's got its own sound of rolling around. Quando giungion davanti alla ruina, quivi le strida, il compianto, il lamento, bestemmian quivi la virtù divina. When they are caught up in this violence, they scream, cry out and lament. They curse the holy power of the divine. As Singleton points out, this quando giungion davanti alla ruina, the reader must wait for clarification of this matter. What is the ruin, la ruina, the violence, the ruin? Seems to mean a breakdown in the rock structure of hell in this circle. Is that what it is? Why should the lamentation of the damned souls be louder here as they pass before the ruin? The point at which the poem throws light on this will be duly noted. Meanwhile, a sense of mystery prevails. And now Dante has a bit of an aside thought. Intesi ca così fatto tormento enno dannati peccator carnali che la ragion sommettono al talento. It struck me that this torment had been fashioned as punishment for the carnal sinners who abandon their reason to desire. So there's that famous line, che la ragion sommettono al talento. Talento is an old Italian word not used anymore, meaning desire or wants or whatever. And so he's come up with the thought, well, that this is how carnal singers who've abandoned all sense of reason and proprietary to their sheer desire, this is how they're being treated. And now, because we're in a place where there's much wind and blowing around, we have the first of three aerial similes, this one relating to starlings. E come gli stornei ne portan l'ali, nel freddo tempo a schiera larga e piena, così quel fiato agli spiriti mali. And we break to the next terzina. And just as starlings are borne up on their wings in cold weather, large fulsome flocks, so does this vortex drive the evil souls. Di qua, di là, di giù, di su li mena, nulla speranza li conferta mai, no che di posa, ma di menor pena. Here, there, up and down it drives them. They have no hope of ever resting, or even of any lessening in their torment. So the simile uses the image of those flocks of starlings one sees in late autumn, the birds such as starlings gathering in flocks, wheeling about in flight. Suggestion of autumn and a winter's coming continues, extends here into the simile of the cranes that we'll hear shortly. So this all contributes to the tone of sadness and melancholy, associated with these seasons. That being a quote from some of Singleton's comments. Those lines 44 and 45. Nulla speranza li conforta mai, non che di posa, ma di minor pena. They are quite important in terms of emphasising peace, which will be echoed again in Francesca's opening. They don't have any hope of ever having any comfort here, not even a mild cessation of the winds. It's just going to go on and on for eternity. And now we get a simile, another aerial simile, this time storks. E come I gru van cantando l'orlai, facendo in aria di sé lunga riga, così vidio venire traendo guai. And just like storks who sing their mournful woe, travelling through the sky in a long line, So I saw coming, uttering their wails, and we had a break there. Ombra portata della detta briga. So I saw coming, uttering their wails, shades borne along by that very storm. And now we get Dante asking Virgil a question. Perché dissi, Maestro, chi son quelle gente che l'aria nera si castiga? Then I asked, Master, who are these people who the dark air so batters? And now we'll get Virgil recite a number of a list again, similar to what we've seen in previous cantos, and he's going to point out people who are in this line. La prima di coloro di cui novelle tu vuoi sapere, mi disse quelli a lotta, fu imperatrice di molte favelle. The first of whom you'd like to know about, he then said, was an empress ruling over many tongues, and probably one of the standout terzinas in the whole canto. A vizio di lussurio fussi rotta, che il libido felicito in sua legge, per torre il biasmo in che si era condotta. She was so enmeshed in lechery that she made licentiousness legal in her laws, to undo the wickedness in which she had engaged. Elle semiramis, di cui si legge, che succedette a Nino e fu sua sposa, tiene la terra che il soldan corregge. She's Semiramide, of who one reads. She succeeded her husband Ninos in the land where the Sultan rules. We'll just go back to that terzina starting at line 55. A vizio di lussurio fussi rotta, che il libido felicito in sua legge, per torre il biasimo in che si era condotta. The vizio di lussurio fussi rotta. Such a strong opening line. By the vice of lust, she was so wrecked, so broken by it. Che libido felicito in sua legge. I find it hard to believe that Dante would actually, in the manuscripts, have used in and not nel, because he would have had the same syllable count in that line, and it would have given him an extra L sound. Che libido felicito nel sua legge. Now, all these lines, as we've said before, are 11 syllable lines. They're hendecasyllable or endecasyllable in Italian. And where you've got, if we think of the second line of the very opening, nel mezzo del cammino di nostra vita mi ritrovai per una selva oscura. So that selva oscura, when you're actually reading it, it reads as 4 syllables and not 5, because you run the A and the O, the end of selva and the beginning of oscura, you run that together. You don't say nella selva oscura, you say selva oscura. I'll read a bit from a great book by Prue Shaw, Clive James's wife. She's a Dante studier for many, many years, called Reading Dante from Here to Eternity, where she explains a little bit about this this feature. Lines that appear to have more than 11 syllables, as many of them do at first glance, prove to have exactly 11 when the principles of what can loosely be called elision, technical term is sinalenfa, are taken into account. I've got that wrong. Sinalofa, Sinaloepha. So that's what makes it mandatory to run the end vowel and the beginning vowel together in 2 accompanying words, so that whenever you apply these laws to Dante's writing, you find that virtually all the lines come out when they're read as having 11 syllables. So in this case, I have a feeling he would have wanted to say che libido felicito nel suo legge. But that using that word felicito, make licit, you can nearly hear it saying felicito, like happiness. So there's like a subtle little connotation there of, lust making you happy in a way. Per torgli il biasmo in che era condotta. Again, it's a strong line, to unravel the wickedness, the evil in which she'd found herself. She'd got into the habit of being. And as Prue points out, the entire Commedia has been analysed for its metrical, for the meter, the syllables, etc. And that can be found online at www.italianverse.reading.ac.uk. And it was an invaluable piece of work done by David Roby. I'm sure he probably contributed to his PhD or some such thing, but someone's actually been through and looked at every single line and broken it and analysed it from the point of view of metrical analysis. So that's Semiramide, di cui si legge, of whom one reads, but we move on. L'altra è colei che s'ancisa amorosa e ruppe fede al cenere di Sicheo, poi è Cleopatra lussuriosa. The other is she who killed herself for love, breaking her bond of faith with Sichaeus, and there's lustful Cleopatra. So the one who ruppe fede con cenere di Sicheo, the giveaway is the name Sichaeus. Now Dante, the writer, doesn't put her name in here. And Bernini reckons it's out of courtesy to Virgil, who's with him, because the character here, che ruppe fede con cenere di Sicheo, the one who broke faith with the ashes of Sichaeus, is Dido, Didone, from the Aeneid. So the story being that Dido and Sicheo were married. He dies, and she was greatly in love with him. She swears eternal faith to Sicheo that she'll never betray him. Along comes Aeneas and his men, and he's a very handsome character. She falls madly in love with him. Aeneas has to move on at some stage and move on to found Rome across the ocean, across the sea, the Med. Departs with all his people, and she, being so forlorn and upset about the whole thing, commits suicide, having realised that she's broken faith with the bond that she'd sworn on her husband's ashes. So her name's not mentioned here, but that's who we're referring to, Dido. And again, the Dido and Aeneas story is celebrated in art, operas, music. It's one of those perennial background love stories. And we mentioned Cleopatra. Obviously, people would have known about it, had affairs with Julius Caesar, Mark Antony. The Romans regard her as being a pretty nasty, lustful character. Whether that's true or not, we don't know. So Virgil continues his pointing out of different characters. Elena vedi, per cui tanto reo tempo si volse, e vedi il grande Achille, che con amore al fin combatteo. See there Helen, who because of her many bad years went by, and see great Achilles, who in the end fought with love. So Helen, wife of Menelaus, the Spartan king, and she's Helen of Troy, is the start of the reasoning, her kidnapping being the reasoning for the whole, Troy story. Achilles, Greek hero of the Trojan War, and Dante's allusion to his death probably refers more to accounts in the Middle Ages and not to Homer's story. Vedi Paris, Tristano, e più di 1000 ombre mostrommi e nominommi a dito, ch'amore di nostra vita di partirle. See there Paris, Tristan, and he indicated more than 1,000 shades, naming and pointing, of whom love had parted from our life. I've used the word 1,000 for mille, but in those days mille meant simply a very great number, quite a large number. So Paris, son of Priam and Hecuba, known in Greek mythology as one of the most handsome of all mortal men, was appointed umpire to decide who was the fairest of the Juno, Minerva, Venus, the three goddesses, and he chose Venus. In the Trojan War, he was he who abducted Helen, led to the Trojan War, and it's he who killed Achilles. So Benvenuto di Imola, that commentator from the 1300s, points out like a special property in terms of how Dante's positioned him, Paris in hell. It says, here immediately after Achilles, the author places Paris, his murderer. Surely Paris may be called a soldier of Venus rather than of Mars. He awarded the apple to Venus, spurring Pallas and Juno. Thus amorous youth, disdaining wisdom and opulence, places the apple, which is the highest good, in sensual pleasure. So they've got this linkage again with sensuality, the lustful, which is where we are. Tristan, the lover of Isolde, and there were several medieval versions of the Tristan story that Dante would have been aware of. And the coupling of Paris and Tristan, and of Helen and Isolde, sort of typical instances of lovers whose woes were wrought by love. That was fairly commonplace in the Middle Ages. Chaucer makes use of that in one of his poems as well. So we've had the naming of quite a few characters, some outright lustful and that way taken. Others whom love departed from. Love was the issue that split them off from living, that killed them essentially. So now, we're about halfway, and what are we, about line 69, 70? So this is common of Dante, and a lot of the cantos, they really split into two. You'll have a first part which sort of leads into what the canto is really about. Then you'll have potentially an encounter, or as we'll now come upon. And he falls into a bit of a reverie here and says, Poscia ch'io ebbe il mio dottore udito, nomare le donne antiche e cavaliere, pietà mi giunse, e fui quasi smarrito. After I'd heard my teacher give names to the noble ladies and gents of old, pity gripped me that I nearly lost it. So we've got that word smarrito, a bit like the very beginning of the whole commedia. Io cominciai, poeta, volentieri parlerei a quei due che insieme vanno, appaiono, si al vento esser leggeri. I began, poet, I'd dearly like to talk to those two who together seem to be gliding so gently on the wind. So a couple of things to note here. We've got two together, whereas everything up until now has been individual people being pulled out, but in this case we've got a couple. And some commentators read the al vento essere leggeri to mean that this couple are lighter and therefore are blown around more. But I find that hard to believe, and the other school of thought is no, they're just gliding more gently on the wind. But there is a bit of an ambiguity there. And Virgil responds, ed egli a me, vedrai quando saranno più presso a noi, e tu allora li priega, per quell'amore che immena, ed ei verranno. And he to me, you'll see that when they are nearer to us, and you plead with them, by the love that carries them, they'll come. A few tongue twisters in the Italian there. Per quell'amore che mena, egli verranno. So Dante's seen this couple that's taken his attention and wants to talk further with them. Si tosto come il vento a noi li piega, mossi la voce, o anima affannata, venite a noi parlare, se altri non liega. Just as the wind bent them towards us, I raised my voice to them. O wearied soul, come speak with us, if it is allowed. So recall that the if it is allowed, se altri non liega. Here in hell we don't ever hear the word God or Christ or Jesus spoken. The only exception to that is in the blasphemers who are busy swearing at God, so they're sort of the only exception. But we don't normally hear the word God or Jesus. Some sort of circumlocution is used to indicate. So if it is allowed, if someone doesn't deny it. And that other nice word, si tosto come il vento a noi li piega. So li piega is literally, bends them towards us, and he mossi la voce. So we now get the third aerial simile. We've had the starlings and the gru, the cranes, and now we've got doves, gentle doves. Quale colombe dal desio chiamate, con l'ali alzate e ferme al dolce nido, vegnon per l'aria dal voler portate. Like doves summoned by desire, their wings set and still, glide through the air to their sweet nest, carried on by their own will. It's a pretty spectacular terzina, that one. Quale colombe dal desio chiamate, they're called by desire to go to their dolce nido. And Benigni makes the point that Dante's use of the word dolce is not it's a very appropriate word. It's not sickly or saccharine. It's just their happy home, their happy nest. Vegnon per l'aria dal voler portate. They come through the air, and they want to come. They want to come. They want to go to their nest for contentedness and that, but they want to come to talk to Dante and Virgil as well. They're born by their own will. Cotali uscir della schiera ove il dido, a noi venendo per l'aria maligno, si forte fu l'affettuoso grido. They came out of that flock where Dido was, towards us through the malignant air, so strong had been my affectionate call. So we get the naming of Didone, that we didn't get earlier when she was being pointed out as colei che ruppe fede con cenere di Sicheo. So now these two are coming out of that group that were gliding through the air, and they're coming through l'aria maligno, that the vile air, as it were, that so strong was Dante's tender, affectionate call, l'affettuoso grido. And one of them now replies in a very, very gracious and courteous manner, O animal grazioso e benigno, che visitando vai per l'aria perso, noi che tegnemmo il mondo di sanguigno. O gracious and kind being, who through this blackened air visits we who so stain the world with blood. So the animal is really a living creature, a being, and the l'aria perso. So perso was a colour, Persian, named after Persian, was black, or a dark colour. Noi continuiamo il mondo di sanguigno. So there's these colours are attached to what's going on here, the blackened air and the reddened nature in which these two stain the world. And they go on, or she goes on. Se fosse amico il re dell'universo, noi pregheremmo lui della tua pace, poi che hai pietà del nostro mal perverso. If the king of the universe were our friend, we'd pray to him to grant you peace, as you have shown such pity for our wretched state. Di quel che udir e che parlar vi piace, noi udiremo e parleremo a voi, mentre che il vento come fa si tace. Of that which you'd like to hear and discuss, we'll listen and speak to you, here while the wind has settled. So we've flipped to plural in the a che parlar vi piace is plural, but the last line there, mentre che il vento come fa si tace, has presented a few different views on what does this mean, the wind settling, but we're in a place where there's eternal, the eternal squall blowing around. But the various differences of opinion still all end up meaning that the wind here is quieting down to give this couple an opportunity to speak to Dante and Virgil about their situation. Just looking back, I also think it's interesting that use the word perso, che visitando vai per l'aria perso, 89. Perso could also mean lost, as well as the blackened air and the lost air, the lost souls. But again, there's this echo of peace. Noi pregheremmo lui della tua pace. So this keeps coming up, this desire for peace. This person now describes their birthplace, which would have made it immediately apparent who in fact they are. And it's a very famous and lovely terzina. Siede la terra dove nato fui, sulla marina dove il Po discende, per aver pace co seguaci sui. I was born in that land near the sea where the Po descends, to be at peace with its tributaries. So the readers of the time, they would have known that this was Francesca da Rimini, and they would have known the story of her and Paolo Malatesta, and how they met their death at the hands of his brother. Very briefly, we'll go through the story so we've got it in context. But just before we do that, just looking at that line 99, now I've never read this in any commentaries, but to me it seems so obvious. This area we're talking about is between Ravenna and Rimini, and it's notoriously boggy and marshy, lots of mosquitoes. I don't think it was completely drained and made viable for agriculture till around the Second World War, really. But so if you read that line, per aver pace co seguaci sui, to me it's the sound of when your feet go through mud when you're walking along. Per aver pace co seguaci sui. I think it's just a bit one of those little word games that Dante plays occasionally. It's definitely the appropriate area. She's describing this area between Ravenna and Rimini. Sadly, ironically, they say truth stranger than fiction. Dante actually met his death on a trip to Venice on behalf of one of the lords of the area, and the Venetians wouldn't give him, out of spite really, a spot on a boat back down the Adriatic from Venice to this area, so he had to travel overland. He caught some sort of a malarial fever, and that's what did him in. He passed away. So in the same area is where he met his own demise. But I think that line's definitely got some sound poetry to it. But now let's just talk about Francesca and Paolo. So Francesca was Francesca da Polenta. She was the daughter of Guido da Polenta of Ravenna, and she married Giovanni Malatesta from the Rimini, and hence she became a Rimini, part of the Malatesta family. Giovanni was called Gianciotto because he was ugly and crippled, and so really these two families were rivals, and to try and heal that situation, to cement a better relationship, this was an arranged wedding. Francesca was fairly headstrong, so the chronicles go, and the father was warned that you might be wiser to do this wedding through a proxy arrangement. If she sees at the wedding Gianciotto, she might not be very very angry, and she's very forthright. So the father took the advice, and they used Paolo Malatesta, a younger brother of Gianciotto, who was quite a handsome youth, to present the marriage proposal and to actually stand in for his brother, so it's said, at the wedding ceremony. But eventually, she wakes up in the morning after the wedding, and she's next to Gianciotto, and she's not very pleased with this. She continues to see Paolo. They obviously form a relationship, and are eventually, caught in a compromising situation by the brother Gianciotto, and both are killed on the spot by Gianciotto at that point, and hence that's the story. And it was a true story, and people in that area of Italy would have been very, very aware of it. So Dante's writing about two people here who are really just quite recent history. And just again, before we leave that line that I've been banging on about, 99, per aver pace co seguaci sui, note it's got the pace piece in it, so there's that word again. We've now got 3 tessinas, all beginning with the word amor. Amor, car cor gentil ratto s'apprende, presi costui della bella persona, che mi fu tolta il modo ancor m'offende. Love, which seizes the noble heart so strongly, seize this man with my fair form, now robbed from me, and the manner of it still offends me. The use of the word il cor gentil immediately brings to mind the poetry and the literature of courtly love, so it's got that reflection straight away. And there's ambiguity about the last line, 102 there, il modo ancora m'offende, the manner of it still offends me. Is it that they were both, having been caught together and both killed together, they had no time to make full confession, and therefore, the court potentially in hell, destined for hell? Or is it the thing that offended her is how she was made love to, that this man seized, per costui della bella forma, ma prende. Apprendere is, Boccaccio uses it in more than in a sense to mean to catch fire. So, is she saying that Paolo got so worked up and caught fire that the method by which, they supposedly fell in love offends her, or is it the fact that they were killed and without a chance to reconcile their souls, as it were, that offends her? So it leaves that somewhat ambiguous. I think personally, on balance, I'd go with that she's offended with being murdered, her and Paolo. Amor, car nullo amato amar perdona, e prese della costui piacer si forte, e come vedi ancora non m'abbandona. Love that does not permit a loved one from returning love sees me so strongly with his attraction that, as you see, he has still not abandoned me. there's that opening lines is a pretty amazing line. It personally took me several days to sort of unravel it. It's a bit like one of those little wooden Chinese puzzles that you come across. Amore che nulla amato amare perdona. So it's basically saying, what I've said in the translation here, that love, che nulla amato, to none that have received love, amare perdona. It negates. It does not permit you to not return love to someone who loves you. So in other words, as Benigni puts it, that when somebody loves you, even a very tiny, he puts it, a little grain of a spark, a little essence of love returns. You can't help it. It's a law. It's inevitable. It will always happen. So this is what she's saying, that having been loved, that there's nothing that could stop her from loving in return. It's like a universal law of love. So this universal law has led to this strong attraction that, they still haven't abandoned each other. Here in hell for eternity, they're still together. They're bound together. And the last of these terzinas, amore condusse noi a luna morta, Caina tenda che a vita ci spense, questa parola d'allora ci fur porte. Love led us both to one death. Caina awaits he who took our lives. These words they spoke to us. Now for the reader, they would not know what Caina is, because it's yet to come, but Caina is down in the 9th circle, the very, very lowest circle, and these are for traitors to family, guests and benefactors. So she's saying, as an inhabitant of hell, she obviously knows about other areas, and she's saying that it's love that led them to one death. So it's love, the actual, not them but love, and that their murderer can be found down in Caina in the 9th circle. We now get Dante's reaction to Francesca's brief telling of their story. Quando io intesi quelle anime offense, chinchino il viso e tanti tiene basso, finché il poeta mi disse, che pensi? When I heard of those two wrong creatures, I bowed my head, keeping it lowered, until the poet asked, what are you thinking? So Dante's quite upset, but quite taken by Francesca's story. He just drops his head. He's that taken aback by it. And Virgil, so what are you thinking? What's the problem? And he'll answer, quando risposi, cominciai, oh lasso, quanti dolci pensieri, quanti disio, meno costora al doloroso passo. Answering, I replied, oh, alas, how many sweet thoughts, how much desire has led these two to this doleful outcome. The doloroso passo is reminiscent of the alto passo from Canto 2 earlier on. Poi mi rivolsi a loro e parlai io, e cominciai, Francesca, i tuoi martiri a lagrimarmi fanno tristo e pio. Then I turned to them and began, Francesca, your sufferings make me weep from sadness and pity. So there can be no doubt now as to who we're talking to. His name Francesca, so we know we're talking to Francesca da Rimini and Paolo Malatesta. Ma dimmi, al tempo dei dolci sospiri, a che e come concedette amore, che conoscesti i dubbiosi desiri? But tell me, in that time of sweet sighs, how was it that love led you to recognise your hesitant desires? So Dante's asking the key question. He just wants to know, well, how did it happen? How was it that you came to just, fall like that, fall in love so unambiguously? And she's going to tell them, è quella a me, nessun maggior dolore che ricordarsi del tempo felice alla miseria, e ciò sa il tuo dottore. So it's quite a famous couple of lines there, and it's been used in operas and songs, and I might play one later on during the discussion phase. She to me, there's no greater pain than to recall to mind those happy times here in our misery, and your teacher knows this. Nessun maggior dolore che ricordarsi del tempo felice nella miseria, e ciò sa il tuo dottore. So there's also a bit of a reference to Virgil here at the end, which says, "Et ciò sal tuo dottore," and this your teacher, your guide, Virgil knows, because Virgil, no doubt, is equally, you can think of happier times, but he knows he's in limbo. So she's potentially referring to this, or she seems to be referring to this, but it's quite a strong, very well known line, and it's been used. Been used quite a lot. Se la prima radice del nostro amore tu hai con tanto affetto, dirò come colui che piange dice. But if you so longingly want to know the first kindling of our love, I shall tell as one weeping tells. And she proceeds. Noi leggevamo un giorno per diletto di Lancelotto come amor lo strinse. Soli eravamo e senza alcun sospetto. We were just passing our time one day reading of Lancelot and how love seized him. We were alone and weren't expecting anything. So there's a lot in this terzina. She's saying they were just passing the time reading the story of Lancelot and Genevieve. These would have been well known at the time, so there's nothing unusual about that. Senza alcun sospetto, does that mean we weren't concerned about raising any suspicion from others, or we weren't concerned, or we didn't expect anything between ourselves? On the form of the poetry itself, this is a terzina that Clive James cites as to an example of why you just can't translate the Italian effectively into English with the same rhythm and carriage, as it were. Because here we've got interline, we've got line rhyming, we've got interline rhyming, but we've got for that un giorno per diletto di Lancelotto. So you've got all those ottos, the O's rhyming, and they're inside lines as well as at the end. Sospetto. Per più fiate agli occhi ci sospinse quella lettura e scolorocci il viso, ma solo un punto fu quel che ci vinse. Several times that reading made our eyes meet and turned our faces pale, but just one instant vanquished us. Quando leggemmo il desiato riso, essere baciato da cotanto amante questi, che mai da me non fia diviso. When we read of how that most desirable smile was kissed by such a famous lover, this man, who shall never be separated from me, la bocca mi baciò tutto tremante, kissed me trembling on my mouth. Galeotto fu il libro e chi lo scrisse, quel giorno più non vi leggemmo avante. That book was a Galeot, and he who wrote it, that day we read on no further. Galeotto is Galeholt, not to be confused with Galahad, who was one of the knights' residents in King Arthur's court, and he had a good friendship with Lancelot. And Lancelot had confided that he'd fallen in love with Queen Guinevere, and Galahad arranged for the two to meet, and he'd urged Lancelot to make love, kiss the Queen. That began their relationship, their guilty love for the two. So the word Galahad has come to mean a go-between, a panderer, and that's the reference that Francesca uses here. So she blames the book. That book was a Galahad, and he who wrote it. And quel giorno più non vi leggemmo avante. That day we read on no further is just left hanging. There's the very last words that Francesca says, and you were left to think, well, does that mean that they got to that point in the book, they kissed and then they made love, or they got to that point, they kissed and then Gianciotto broke in and killing them both. So it's left hanging there. Quel giorno più non vi leggemmo avanti. It's quite a nice ending to her speech. While all this has been happening, we've heard not a peep out of the other person, Paolo. He's just been there next to Francesca. She's done all the talking. Mentre con uno spirito questo disse, l'altro piangea, sì che di pietate io viene men così come io morisse, e caddi come corpo morto cadde. While the one spirit said this, the other just wept, so that in pity it seemed I would pass away, and I fell as a dead body falls. And that's the closeout of the canto. that last line, e cadde come corpo morto cadde. It's got like a rolling, I'm sure Dante saw bodies die. He'd been in battle, he'd been in the military himself, and he would have seen death, and it's captured in that last line, e cadde come corpo morto cadde. I fell as a dead body falls. So all this time, Paolo has just been quietly weeping. They're there for eternity. Francesca has done all the talking, and Paolo has just been there. L'altro piangea, the other just cried. And Dante's just gripped with just complete pity, and he just collapses. He just viene men così come io morisse. He can't. It was as if he died. It just fades away, and that's the end of the canto. And we'll be back shortly for some discussion on the canto. So I guess the bottom line is, how do we actually feel about Francesca and Paolo when we read the story? Do we feel sympathy for them, or are we a little bit taken aback or a bit suspicious or whatever? We pointed out some of the ambiguities in the text, like particularly the way Minos might circle his tail, that line about essere leggere, being light on the wind. Does that mean that they were blown around or carried gently? There was that other line, 96, come va si tace. All the commentators had sort of grappled with that one. So there's and that one about il modo ancora m'offende. Was she offended by the way in which Paolo, proposed to her or propositioned her in a way, or is she offended about the death, the murder? So it's replete with, these subtle ambiguities in the text which possible to ignore. Invariably, people seem to fall into two camps. They either have a lot of pity for Francesca and Paolo, or they feel that she's spinning a bit of a tale here. I think for the first couple of years that I was aware of this canto, I was in the first camp, but I think as time's gone on, I've shifted more to the second camp of being, I don't particularly take everything she's saying here. It's a little bit of a put on, I think. And if anything, I said earlier that I think Minos's opening line to the people, to Dante and Virgil as they enter, I think there's a bit more in that than people, might expect. He says, "Guarda come entri, in cui tu ti fidi." Watch out how you enter and in whom you trust. I think he's not just referring to Virgil in this case. I think he's actually referring to the other people that Dante may meet, not just here in this circle of the lustful, but also throughout the Inferno, because he's the dispatcher to all the various circles. So he's saying, I think there's a bit more in this. I think he's saying, just be careful, who you actually place your trust in, who you believe. It's not generally picked up that way, but I think you can actually read it that way. I mean, he's there, he sees them all come and go, and he sends them all on. So he's giving us a bit of a hint. There's definitely that sad aspect of the people in this circle are not at rest. They're being swirled constantly for eternity, always swirled around. The wind never dies down, other than when God sort of dies, calms it down so that these two can speak to Dante and Virgil. So there is this element of forever seeking peace, to be at rest, and it comes out in Francesca's opening line, which where the river seeks peace, seeks to be at peace with its tributaries. So it's a sort of a theme that underlies a lot of the goings on in this canto. It's certainly a canto that plays on your mind. You as I said earlier, you can form a view one way, and then over time you start to have doubts, and you may change that view 180 degrees, as it were. The contrapasso here is pretty evident. I think the lustful who sommettono il ragion, they submit their reason to desire. They're swirled around because in life they were effectively swirled around by their own lusts, their own sexual appetite, so that they couldn't control. And here in this circle, they're swirled around accordingly. So the contrapasso is, I think, pretty straightforward. I mentioned that there were an awful lot of works derived from the Francesca story, and operas, paintings, all sorts of things. Rodin's Kiss, and I thought to finish off, I'll play a piece from Rossini's Otello. It's towards the end of the opera, where Desdemona is yet to have her final meeting with Otello, and she's with her maid, and they're singing a duet, and there's recitative, but out off stage, coming from outside of the building, they're in Venice, so it's a gondoliere punting one of his gondolas along the canal, and he's singing the lines 121 to 123. Nessun maggior dolore che ricordarsi del tempo felice nella miseria. So it's a direct lift, and it sort of suits the very mournful period of time that where Desdemona is considering her future. It's quite appropriate, and it's a direct lift from this canto. So we'll play that now, and once again, thanks for listening. See you next time. There is no greater pain than to recall to mind those happy times here in our misery.
Nessun maggior dolore, nessun maggior dolore, ricordarsi del tempo felice